River Nile, traditionally it would flood every year, and that would refurbish all the grounds where people grew their food. And then they put that great big dam up there, huge dam, and that stopped happening. And it had a direct effect within a very short time on the fertility of the surrounding soils. And you know, the biggest sardine fishery in the world used to be where the Nile went out into the sea. And after the dam was put in place, the fishery died completely because the sardines were feeding off all the nutrients that came in through that water. And so you take the Waikato River, or Hawke's Bay rivers are even better, because Hawke's Bay rivers wander across the landscape, or they used to, and that's some of the most fertile land in New Zealand. And now all the rivers are completely controlled between stock banks. Is that enough discussion about those things, thinking about those sort of things? What I want us to do is, I mean, we can talk about that for a long time, but if you're anything like me, after a while it's like a glass of beer. If you leave it standing too long, it goes flat. You know,
I agree.
And so what I think we should do is actually have a quick cup of tea. We don't really need to eat very much, do we? Just have a very big breakfast. Then we need to walk for a long way to keep work on the breakfast. And then we'll just go for a bit of a meander, and we'll go along this track that Joe has sort of, will lead us along there to a certain point where it does start to become difficult. And that's as far as we'll go as a group, and then we will make our own way back in our own time. Because just to keep working on the plant identification side of it, and the actual network, the plant network, how the families on the bush are actually living together. Now, if you find things that you're still not sure about, or if there are things that you are still mixing up, then if the people that you're with can't tell you, well, then bring those ones back to me, and I won't be too far away. I'll just be wandering around, distracting everybody and things like that, you know. And if you're noticing if you find something unusual, bring it back and share it with us. It might be just the memory of what we've seen, or it might be a leaf that looks different, or whatever else, so that we can keep learning from it. Does that sound really good?
Yeah.
Well, we'll just see how we go. That's the part that I'm most wanting to happen. Remembering that we are in a different geology that we've had before. If we had more time, we would actually, well, you can't quickly tell just by preparing a rongoa whether it's going to work differently to what it does in the Bay of Plenty, for instance. But just to be aware of that, and just look at the distribution of plants because of the different types of soil. So your pH here is probably about 2 above what it is in tohunga, in the kaimais, which is a big jump in the pH level. And that means a big difference in the actual microorganisms in the soil and all sorts of things. Insects, if you keep an eye out for seeds, there are still some plants with fruit on them. That little coprosma with the black berries on, and some are almost really black. It is, I'm quite sure, coprosma, the one I said it was yesterday.
Oblongiata.
What's that?
Starts with R. Rhamnoides, yeah.
Rhamnus. But there's also Coprosma areolata around here. Those are little leaf ones. And if you find berries, well, they're nice to eat. But some other trees may have berries. They are all things for us to learn from. You know, which is a lot of trees, you cannot distinguish them until they actually have flowers or actually fruit.
Are there any native ants, or are they all introduced?
No, there are natives.
There's over 50 species of native ants.
50. Oh.
And most of them actually form colonies, but there are some that are less so. But there are introduced ants which are causing lots of troubles.
Mm.
But ants are wonderful, wonderful creatures. They make the most of any opportunity that comes their way. And even though they're useless, we've really got to admire them. But see, you take kumaraho, the way that kumaraho disperses its seeds is by the help of ants. Ants will pick up the seeds and cart them for a while and then drop them. They don't eat them. And they just think, well, this is a nice looking seed, off they go with it. So if you've got kumaraho growing naturally, there is almost certainly going to be ants round about. Pretty tricky, isn't that, really? The role of insects in dispersing seeds really hasn't been adequately investigated yet. But that certainly is wrong with your kumaraho families. You know, it's quite good. Some insects have a key role in actually, you talk about a lot of seeds like metal need to go through a pigeon before in actual fact it'll grow. It's not quite true, but it certainly helps. The role of insects in actually enabling seeds to germinate is important. Some seeds won't germinate unless they encounter a particular fungus. And it's the fungus reacting on the seed shell, the outer skin of it, that it actually enables it to actually burst into life. And orchids, most orchids can only grow if they actually team up with a fungus. And they're completely parasitic at that stage. You know, they're so tiny. See, most seeds have actually got a little food store in them to get the plant going. And then once it grows enough, it gets roots into the soil and a little bit of leaf to get some chlorophyll. Then it can start to photosynthesize and absorb nutrients. Orchid doesn't have that little bit of energy. So it gets it entirely from the fungus that it teams up with. We're finding new species of plants in New Zealand, you know, even around here. For the plant botanists, I mean, this is an extraordinary area. Some of the rocks around here are several 100 million years old. And there are plants that are directly associated with that very, very old rock. And the actual geology here is very similar to parts of Nelson. Nelson is the oldest part of New Zealand in many ways. So you get outcrops, you know, limestone outcrops on top of volcanic areas and things like this, which are very ancient, and that actually makes for some very interesting plant associations. If you don't feel like going for, well, don't go. There's plenty around here to look at, but that opportunity is there. Total kaifiri that often in the very mature leaves, the readiness can actually disappear. These ones are not too bad. That one there hasn't got too much red. And remembering you've got a male and a female, so the lack of the lack of berries may indicate that it's, you know, tall, dark and handsome and quite useless. And then you've got your mahoi next door, and initially they look quite similar, but in actual fact they are very different. You see that the poro kaifiri, the leaves are in pairs, and they're alternate pairs more or less. These ones here, the leaves are alternate, one above the other. There's a and the form of the tree is quite different. Yeah, it's called whitey wood because of those white blotches, but again remembering that they are actually a lichen, they're not part of the tree itself.
Is it like, can mainly just grow on the martha?
It grows on lots of trees, but it's a feature on the martha. So look at the coprosmas, you may find more berries.
Yeah.
So after 10 minutes we've actually haven't gone anywhere.
Stay in the parking lot.
To just move on to that next tree there, which is very pretty.
Is that the cabrona under here?
Yes, it is. Yes, tarata. First form of the tarata.
Oh, there it is, that one there.
Yeah.
Oh, so yeah. You know, some of them have got that sort of
Parata.
reddish thing on the leaf. And this one doesn't.
Tarata.
Does it make any difference to medicinal?
Not really, as long as the actual oil is actually present. But see how easy it is to mix up this karamu with the tarata? And of course, if you're picking karamu, you actually accidentally pick some of that, you would actually change your medicine quite completely.
Lemon wood and caramel.
You could see this stuff coming up. When I was doing my training, we got some of that and put it into our fern, and we were very proud that it was doing so well. And it wasn't until much later that I found out that it was actually an import. It can actually be classified as a noxious weed. You know, I think it's Legionella, I think it's the name for it, is that right?
Legionella,
yeah.
Growing very well on this side.
Oh, great, magnificently here.
Where have you got light falling?
What's that?
It's wherever you got light, so once your canopy's broken, it will start to spread. It will spread from our feet, walking.
What's it called?
Legionella.
Legionella.
But the difficulty with it is it actually smothers the ground and makes it less likely for seedlings to actually take over. So it has a similar action to that wandering woolly, which used to be called wandering Jew, but no, I say that anymore. You know, it basically forms a mat over the ground, and that suppresses the regeneration. But people are still transplanting it into their garden. You know, so we've really got to be quite alert. Some of these non-feature lilies, which are really quite a problem.
Road echo.
Remembering that word. We're now in Tainui, so we call it road echo. And that's the one that actually got the yellow bark on it. Is that a bigger one over there? These trees may not actually be big enough. We've got a colour there. And it's got that very distinctive caprosma smell.
Like tongue. Yeah. That doesn't smell too bad.
Yeah, I'm surprised that one's there. The John's cow's not like that. Yeah, it's very, very palatable to deer. This is the place where it really does like it. It likes to be in the shade, likes to be sub-canopy, whereas your karamu likes to be actually on the edge of the bush in the sunshine. And that's really important in terms of knowing where to look for it and knowing where to plant it if you're growing it. And it also prefers to have damper soil rather than drier soil. And then put a weta behind us here.
Sorry, does anyone want to see that?
Put the weta.
Yeah.
And what's above that? Above the conifer?
It's a sort of a green tree.